Hello and welcome to MTG Deck Tech, your source for the best decks in Magic the Gathering Arena. I'm Marcel and I want to welcome you to this in-depth review of Mono Black Aggro for the Standard 2020 event. So the Standard 2020 event is an event where you can play with all the cards that are gonna be legal when the old cards rotate out, so Ixalan and stuff like that, Dominaria, and it also has 5 or 6 cards of Throne of Eldraine, which you could win when playing the Brawl event, and so you can build decks that are somewhat like the new decks that are gonna be in Eldraine, but not really because you don't have the Eldraine cards. But you can get used to losing some cards. And with the Mono Black, we're gonna lose a few cards only. We're gonna lose the Vicious Conquistador here, which is bad because it's a 1-drop, but it's not too bad because it's not a huge loss for the deck. You also lose the cast downs. Which is really the biggest loss for the deck. It's always a nice way to have cheap removal in black decks, but yeah, you're gonna have to do without. And I'm gonna show you in a few seconds what we are gonna do to make the deck work without cast down. Also, we're gonna lose Find Finality, which was a way for us to get cards back from the graveyard, but we also have, and also Death Baron, but that we didn't really need the Death Baron. That was just a card I had there to add some flavor into my deck. But the new deck is really good. I think it got better. That's not the deck. There. I think that deck got better. So because of the new card I put in, which is the Order of Midnight, which is one of the new adventure cards. So you can cast the Alter Fate first, and then cast the monster card, the creature card second. Which means you have the ability to either return something and play the creature next turn, or just play the creature normally out of hand, and you have the flexibility to do with the card, almost anything you like, really. You can use it as a way to replace a Find Finality. Of course, it only brings back one card, but then again, in Find Finality, you are mostly bringing back the one card you needed. Sometimes you have 2 cards you want, but most of the times it's just that one Spawn of Mayhem, for example, that's in your graveyard and you want to play it, so you play the Find Finality, but Order of Midnight works for that as well. And it has the upside of being a creature after that. So I put 4 in it, whereas with the Find Finality I only had 2 of it. So you have more ability to get stuff from your graveyard to your hand and ultimately back into the battlefield. But first let's look at the mana base. As we see, we have an aggro slash a bit of mid-range type of deck. You have 19 Swarms and 2 Cryptic Caves. The Cryptic Caves are there to draw some cards in the late game, which you will need to do if the match goes longer, and you will most likely be in a card disadvantage because of cards like Rotting Regisaur. But I'm gonna get to that when I go through the cards. I'm gonna do it just as the Boros deck. The Boros Feather deck. I would have wanted to make a gameplay video out of Boros Feather, but I don't think it's really good in this format, so I'm just gonna leave it at that and do it with this deck. So actually gonna change something here because I need more Gutterbones, but I'm gonna get to that. First, I have the Disfigure. Very nice, very early removal. You can also use it as a combat trick if your opponent has a creature that's bigger than 2/2 but would lose against another creature in combat if you reduce it by 2. So you can use it as a combat trick and also as a removal of 2 toughness creatures, or if you play 2 for 4 toughness creatures. This is a very nice card. added in M20, and yeah, this is like one of your main forms of early removal. So now I have the Gutterbones. Gutterbones enter the battlefield tapped, which is not so nice because you can jump block with them the round you play them, but it's not that bad because you don't have haste in black anyway, so you couldn't attack with it at all, so it's not that big of a deal. The Gutterbones is good because first it has a 2/1, which is a nice power in the early game, but you can also return it for 2 mana if you damaged your opponent. So if you have if your opponent lost life, you can bring it back in at your own turn, which is nice because you're gonna have some sacrificing in this deck, but you can also just swing with it a few times, even if you know it's gonna die. It's always nice to have these cards, and it's your main form of getting board advantage because you're not gonna have any cards to draw except for these Cryptic Caves, but they won't be enough to get any card advantage in your hand, so you will need to get the card advantage by bringing your stuff back from the graveyard, as is usual in black decks. Knight of the Ebon Legion is a very, very powerful card from M20. You know this card if you play with or against vampire decks. Whereas the vampire deck loses much of its power, the black deck is still going strong, and this Vampire Knight is one of the most important cards in this deck. It's a 1 cost, it's 1/2, which is okay, but it also has this wonderful pump ability that you can get +3/+3 until end of turn, and also Death Touch. So that's a wonderful combat trick. Of course, your opponent will know that it's coming. You will always have to look if you play against the Knight of the Ebon Legion, if your opponent has 3 mana open, and one of them being black. But your opponent will most likely know that you're gonna pump it. So you will want to pump it when it's not blocked, or if your opponent has to block it with something and that would die otherwise, you will have to pump it to protect it. But most of the time when you pump it, it gets to 4 power, and that is enough to trigger the second effect. So the second effect is if one player lost 4 life in this turn, you get a +1/+1 counter at your end step. Which is a very nice ability. The Knight of the Ebon Legion can get out of hand very, very quickly because of this ability. Just gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and your opponent has to do something against it. Otherwise, it's good night for him or her. Sanitarium Skeleton is again a 1 cost, a 1/2, which is okay, but it also has this return from graveyard ability. This return from graveyard ability costs 1 more than the Gutterbones ability, which costs 2 mana. Sanitarium costs 3 mana, and that's the downside of it. The upside is you don't have to damage your opponent in the turn to activate this ability. So it's a little more consistent, which is why I had 4 and 2 before, but I think the Gutterbones power is better in the new meta, so I'm gonna leave it at 3/3. But either way, it works very nice. Just you need these creatures that get back from the graveyard to your hand to be successful with this mono black deck. One of the reasons you need that is because I have put Spark Harvest into the deck as a kind of a replacement for the cast down, because you can sacrifice a creature and kill another creature of your opponent, but with Spark Harvest you can also play a Planeswalker. So it's not a replacement per se, but a better way to even get rid of Planeswalkers, which you hadn't had before I put this card in to the new version of the deck. You can also play it for 5 mana if you don't have a creature to sacrifice. If it's late game and you don't have a creature, sometimes this is worth it. But most of the times you're gonna sack a creature. Eternal Taskmaster is a creature that can also bring creatures back from the graveyard. You need to pay 3 additional mana when it's attacking, and then you can return a target creature card. So there's nothing really more to say about it. 2-3 for 2 is a very, very nice deadline. It's really okay. And the Eternal Taskmaster is also tapped, which means it cannot block in the first round, just as Gutterbones can. But yeah, that's a very nice card to get some stuff back from the graveyard. I have 3 at the moment. Might be opting to go to 2 because I have the Order of the Midnights. But right now this is working out pretty nice, and it's a pretty nice creature. So we needed to replace the cast down. One way we're gonna do that is the Legion's End. Legion's End exiles creatures with converted mana cost 2 or less, which means mostly very small creatures, but also some creatures with X cost. So for example, the Hydroid Krasis has the X cost and then 2 mana. X is treated as 0, even if the creature is 10/10, which can of course happen for a Hydroid Krasis. It still means this creature will be exiled. So Legion's End has a pretty narrow applicability, but it's applicable to more things than you would expect. Also the Hydra spell, the big one from green with the X's, you can also get rid of this. And Legion's End also gives you information. So what you want in Magic is always the most information you can get. You want to know what's in your deck. You want to know what's in the opponent's hand. You will want to know anything you can to get an advantage over your opponent. Most of the times, the person with the information is gonna be better off. So it also exiles cards other than the card you select, if it's the same card in the opponent's hand. So if your opponent has Hydroid Krasis on the battlefield and 2 Hydroid Krasis in hand, it's gonna get rid of all of them, which can really, really destroy your opponent. I've been destroyed by Legion's End so much. I totally underestimated this card when it came out, but I got wrecked by it so often in so many different decks. It's not even funny anymore. So I have 2 of them in this deck, only 2 because of course if your opponent has bigger creatures, you're gonna need a Murder. Murder is pretty much cast down, a poor man's cast down, because it costs 1 more, but it does get rid of legendary creatures, which the cast down couldn't do. So I have 1 of them in the deck, just to have a way of getting rid of creatures. When Eldraine drops for good, I'm gonna have the 3 mana removal creature, which has the adventure cost in it. I can't remember its name, but that will be nicer than Murder. I'm gonna pretty much put 2, 3, 4 maybe of them in the deck instead of Murder. But for now, for the event, I have the Murder. Order of Midnight, as I said, is a very nice card. You can return cards from the graveyard, and you can also play this flying creature, which cannot block, which is bad, of course. But 2/2 for 2 has flying is pretty okay, and the sorcery effect is also pretty okay. Put together, you have a very flexible option to have in your deck. You pretty much can play 2 cards for 1, which is very nice. You need this sort of card advantage because, as I said, you will not be able to draw much. But what you will be able to do is discard your opponent. This is Drillbit. Drillbit is one of the best cards in this deck. I have won so many matches just by getting the 1 card your opponent needs out of their hand. So this is kind of the more control-y style of control-y part of this deck, because yeah, it's how control players play with things like Thought Erasure or Duress or something. This is mostly the same as Thought Erasure, but it doesn't surveil. The other thing is similar. You can reveal the hand of your opponent. You choose a non-land card from it, so sorceries, instants, enchantments, planeswalkers, creatures, whatever you want, and get rid of it. Get it into the graveyard. The good thing about Drillbit is you can cast it for 1 if you damaged your opponent in that turn. So swinging in with your creatures, already bad enough, but your opponent also gets to get rid of their best card. Of course, this is something that comes with experience. You will have to play a lot against different decks to know what card do I need to get rid of in this particular situation? That's not something I can teach in one of these videos. It's just you'll have to learn what your opponent's deck will be wanting to do, what you can do in this situation. So for example, if you have a murder in hand, you will not want to get rid of the creature because you can kill it, but you will rather get rid of the planeswalker, for example. So you will have to see what card is best to discard for your opponent, but you will have the information anyway, and you will have the way to get rid of stuff that can hurt you. So Drillbit is a very nice card. It's always nice to have in the hand, even if you have 2 of them in the hand. That's not too much at the beginning. You can always play it for 3 mana if you don't attack with the creature, but of course less mana is better, so you most likely want to use it with the spectacle cost. Rotting Regisaur is a very, very, very powerful card. So 3 mana, 7 power, 6 toughness. This thing is huge. It doesn't die to any red removal most of the times. You'll have to do some black or white removal, and this is just a very strong card. It doesn't have trample or anything, so you will be able to block it with 1/1 creatures every round, but you'll have to get 1/1 creatures every round to do that. So it's a very nice card to get pressure onto your opponent's life total as quick as possible. And of course, with such a powerful card, there is a drawback. You will have to discard a card at the beginning of your upkeep. So that's before you draw a card. So if you have a card in your hand that you want to play the next turn, try to keep another card in your hand as well, because otherwise you will have to discard this as it is before the draw step. So I will keep like an excess land or something in my hand and discard that and play the better thing later in the round. So what you want to do with Rotting Regisaur is you want to wait until you have played most of your other creatures in hand. So if you have very nice things you want to play, like a Spawn of Mayhem or something, you will have to play that most of the times before Rotting Regisaur gets on the battlefield, because it will just get rid of your hand and you will have a very big card disadvantage, and some of the time you will have to get rid of really good cards. So you'll always have to watch out for that. Do you have cards that can be discarded without hurting you too much? If yes, play that Rotting Regisaur, play 2 of them, doesn't matter. If you're top decking anyway, it doesn't matter. You don't discard a card that you don't have in the hand, and you will always have 1 card in hand because the Rotting Regisaur triggers before the draw step. So this is the card that will win you a lot of matches, because 7 damage is really, really much. So yeah, if your opponent can survive that, they will have a good chance, but most of the times they're not gonna survive like 2 or 3 Rotting Regisaurs on your battlefield, just punching them for more and more damage. Something your opponent won't survive as well is the Spawn of Mayhem, which is an even more powerful card, in my opinion, than the Rotting Regisaur. It is a mythic, so you'll have to spend mythic wildcards for it, but it is worth it. It's a 4/4 for 4, but most of the times it's a 4/4 for free, because you can cast it spectacle cost. When you dealt damage to your opponent that turn, you can just cast it for 3 mana. And this is amazing. It has flying, it has trample, so even if you block it, it's gonna go through for damage. And an even more important ability, it will deal 1 damage to every player at the beginning of your upkeep. As if that wasn't enough, if you have 10 or less life, you get a +1/+1 counter on the Spawn of Mayhem. So even if nobody does anything in the match, you will always be blocked by the spawn. Your spawn is always blocked, let's say, and everyone just loses the life. You will still come out on top because you have a stronger and stronger creature towards the end of the game. This is why I have 4 of them in the deck. It's just the amazing card. I love it. I play it every time I'm able to play it, so it's the most important card in the whole deck. You'll just have so much fun beating down your opponents with that flying trampler and with the passive ability. Nothing more to say about it, just love it, play 1, play 2, play 3. Just don't play it if you have very little life total. If you just have 2 lives and you can't kill your opponent in the next turn, then you shouldn't play it. But that's just logical. So you always have to look out for your life as a resource. But otherwise, it's very nice. It's just the best card. Cavalier of Night is another form of removal for you. Because when it enters the battlefield for 5 mana, which is very much in this type of deck, but it's a late game card. You wouldn't want to have it in your opening hand. If it is there, it's most of the time fine, but you would rather draw it later. This Cavalier of Night can sacrifice another creature. When you do, you can destroy a target creature your opponent controls. So it's similar to Spark Harvest, but you can only destroy creatures, not planeswalkers. But you also have a 4/5 with lifelink. This is the only really way to gain life in this deck. You see nothing here has any lifelink or any gain life. So for the late game, you're gonna need some life. You can play it. You don't have to sacrifice anything. Some of the times I just play it to get the lifelink and get more life, or just to have a big creature on the field. So it does a few things to alleviate the weaknesses of your deck, because your deck generally can't go that long. It's not as good as Boros Feather when going to a long game, but it can do a long game because of cards like Spawn of Mayhem and the Cavalier of Night. So yeah, this is the Mono Black 2020 version for the event 2020. I'm playing it ranked exclusively at the moment at a 60% win rate. This season hasn't been the quickest for me, so I'm stuck in Platinum 1, but I think with this deck I'm gonna be able to climb pretty fast. So yeah, I'm gonna make the next video playing something. I'm not sure if this deck is what I want to play. I could also go for the Feather deck. This time I'm gonna do a Naya Feather, so with green splashed in. Just to give you a sneak preview, I'm gonna have cards like Season of Growth, Collision Colossus, Domri's Ambush, as a replacement for the Reckless Rage in it. But this deck is not yet finished. I have to try it out more. I'm gonna try it out when I'm at Diamond, so I can't lose my level anymore, and as well see if this deck has any good effect for it. Until then, I'm just gonna leave you at that, and hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you can play the deck, win with it. If you have any comments on it, maybe cards I forgot to put in it, always tell me. I did get to Mythic with this, with a similar version of this deck at earlier season, 3 months ago or something. So it is a very nice deck to play, and I hope you have fun with it. Until next time, this was MTG Deck Tech. See you!